men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Wednesday's edition of London's premier financial newspaper, the Financial Times, featured this headline on the front page. U.S. Treasury market faces liquidity concerns. Now, reading the Times headline made me think of Major League Baseball legend Yogi Berra's famous quote, "It's like deja vu all over again." Throughout 2007 and the first half of 2008, I talked about a coming liquidity crisis. I interviewed many guests in the financial industries who told us there will be a liquidity crisis. But when it hit in September 2008, the establishment news media said nobody saw it coming. It's mid-2015, and there are signs everywhere, once again, that liquidity is drying up, and it's drying up fast. It's like a car engine without oil. The motor is going to lock up any minute, and the vehicle will come to a screeching halt in the middle of the highway. Hat trick letter author and publisher Jim Willie is on the phone to give us a raw and not so pretty analysis of what is happening in the world economic system and where he believes it is headed. He is the author and publisher of the Hat Trick Letter, which is found on the website goldenjackass.com. Jim, is liquidity in the Treasury markets drying up, as the Financial Times is telling us in Wednesday's edition?
Yes, it's not as bad as the California drought, but we have a 60% decline in average daily bond volume in the U.S. Treasury bond market. 60% decline compared to 2 years ago. That is significant, and that is an end game signal. We've got all kinds of cracks showing in the ancillary windows, and not so much markets, if you will, but sub-markets and windows like the repo, the repurchase program window, the dollar swap window. You have negative rates across banks. You've got abuse of reverse repo, which means the Fed secretly shoves money into the system with no collateral using the repo window. In other words, hidden QE. You've got all kinds of indirect exchange, which is foreign countries dumping their treasuries in third-party trades, like China paying for pipelines for Gazprom in Russia and using treasury bonds. There are all kinds of signals now of fracture in the U.S. Treasury bond market. This is an end signal. We're out of the eighth inning. We're in the ninth inning now. I'm not saying the breakdown is going to happen tomorrow or 2 months from now, but we're in a position now where even the U.S. government is holding secret meetings with the big banks, big financial firms, Department of Treasury, major hedge funds, if not mutual funds, and they're giving dates of October or earlier where the U.S. is going to radically change. So they're giving warnings now. Something is brewing, and we're very close. We're just, I just think we're 3 months away from radical changes, and the Treasury market, I've been saying all along, the Treasury market is your breakdown center of attention, and now I'm starting to call it something more, Rick. I'm starting to call the Treasury bond a black hole because corporate bonds and hedge funds and foreign currencies, not hedge funds, junk bonds, corporate bonds, junk bonds, and foreign currencies are abandoning ship in favor of the Treasury bond as stocks supported by interest rate swap derivatives. But this black hole is attracting funds behind capital throughout the global economy. We're seeing a movement away from capital and into the Treasury bond. This is a final signal. We're here.
Jim, this is the first time I've heard this statement about U.S. federal government officials meeting secretly with the biggest banks and saying that there will be radical changes this fall, October 2015. Do you have any idea what kind of radical changes? What are we looking at?
I think the advent of anticipated riots, I think we're going to see finally either the launch or the announcement of future launch of a new dollar. The dollar, I think, is going to be described, outlined, laid out, and announced for future launch. And it will involve a devaluation, and it will shock the nation. We're running out of time where the U.S. economy has the privilege of using this U.S. dollar as foreign currency reserve. We're running out of time for this QE application of unsterilized bond purchase program. You cannot conduct a Zimbabwe monetary policy on the global currency reserve where trillions of dollars are sitting as savings in major nation and intermediate nation banking systems. You can't do that. So the world has put the U.S. dollar on notice for the last 3 years, ever since it became clear that QE was not a temporary device. When QE came on in 2012, I said, expect numerous sequences of QE. I will call it QE to infinity. And that was a correct call. Just like the zero interest rate policy, ZARP, I said that'll be ZRIP forever. They're in a corner. They cannot raise interest rates. If they did, they'd wreck the Fed's balance sheet. If they raised rates, they'd wreck the Wall Street bond carry trade. If they did, they'd wreck the entire machinery for producing phony long-term Treasury bond demand through the interest rate swap derivative. So they're stuck with the 0%, and they're stuck with monetizing the U.S. government trillion-dollar annual deficits. So the world is coming up with its own rejection of the dollar. I think an intermediary transition of RMB Chinese currency settlement and trade, which would become much more popular. Even in the United States, major retailers and other corporations are being forced to settle on their Asian supply for, shipments, big container shipments from Asia. They're being forced to send in payment to mostly Chinese firms RMB, the Chinese currency. They're not settling in dollars. So the RMB is making a big increase, headway. It's more than a headway. It's gone from significant to very significant, and I think it's going to challenge the dollar. I think there's going to be a big announcement coming up in the next few months about how the U.S. dollar will no longer be the global reserve currency, and it's going to trigger dozens of important questions, including, does that mean the United States falls into the third world? The answer is yes.
Jim, is this announcement going to come during or after the September-October meeting of the IMF?
I don't know. Maybe simultaneous. I don't know. I don't have access to, the meeting and its minutes. I just got word from one of my many different news hounds, not a major source of mine, not The Voice, not London Paul or Euroraj I've got about 15 different very reliable news hounds, and they're extremely valuable to me. It's like they fill up my inbox every day. So I wake up, like today, I started at a little before 6 a.m., and my time, we're on Mountain Equivalent time. First thing I do is I look to see any major stories in my inbox from the various people who helped me out. I mean, they're all over the place. Some of my non-colleagues who are really important are Matt in the United States, Don in Florida, Cambo Jill, who's a Hawaiian U.S. citizen living in Cambodia. I got George, who lives in Costa Rica here. I got another ex-military Navy, U.S. military Navy guy in El Paso. And they all supplied me with information, and I can't remember exactly who told me about the September meeting, but I imagine there are lots of September meetings coming.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you've got Jade Helm. You've got all kinds of things going on.
And I was going to bring up Jade Helm. Is Jade Helm in anticipation of this October change?
I think so. I think also Jade Helm is targeting Texas. Remember 2 years ago, Texas had a lot of discussion in their legislature about exercising their 10th Amendment rights as members of the United States as a nation. 10th Amendment gives individual states the right to basically move in distance a little bit away from the federal government and have some independence. Oh, my gosh, the bankers in Washington and New York did not like that. And now the Texans are doing something even more. They're trying to get a global gold repository to be established and built in Texas, and starting with their own $1 billion that's sitting in the New York Fed in gold. The Texans have $1 billion at the New York Fed in gold bullion. I don't think you're ever going to see it.
You know, Jim, I know you mentioned this in your most recent hat trick letter. The state representative, Giovanni Capriglione from South Lake, Texas, is the one who wrote that bill, which is now state law. You know, I brought him on the program to talk about the repatriation of Texas gold from New York to Texas. I did not expect him to tell us that this new law actually establishes a Texas gold bank that the public can participate in, that, you know, you and I could put gold in this Texas bank and write checks on it. You know, we could have debit cards, credit cards based on our gold holdings. And the moment he told me that, I was like, this is the reason Jade Helm lists Texas as hostile territory. They're hostile to the Federal Reserve.
Yes. I think they're trying to use thin cover that's hostile to the U.S. government because of illegal immigrants crossing the border and causing a lot of problems for, you know, state funds for supporting all the, you know, the safety nets, you know, like insurance and medical and all that stuff, education. But I think Texas is going to be understood and labeled and targeted as enemy to the federal system. Yes. And I don't know the details, and I give you credit for breaking this story about the global gold repository. This has enormous implications. It means money fleeing from Venezuela can come and reside in the Texas depository in the form of gold. It means that Canadians who don't like what's going on in their own government can move substantial amounts of money, convert to gold, and store it in Texas. They compared it, I believe, to a Singapore-type depository. This is revolt. I mean, I don't like using certain zip words, but this is very contrary to the entire concept of the U.S. federal government system that's being run by a banking criminal syndicate that's tied very closely with the military contractors and very closely with Big Pharma, the drugs and Monsanto, vaccines, and very closely with the news networks. So what we're seeing is, I think, a kind of a coming out exposure of the elements of the U.S. crime syndicate that's running the government. And Texas is, I think, getting in the way. Let's see if they get back any of their gold. Germany did not.
Yeah, that's going to be the first test, isn't it? Will the gold actually go back to Texas? Yeah, Texas would have the potential here to mint its own currency.
Well, yeah, and this is far-reaching. I mean, they might have an entire banking system that has a central bank in Texas. They might secede from the Union. This is very big. A monetary system could emerge from Texas with the Texas dollar, the Texas gold dollar, and watch it go up in value. But they better be careful for two things: a tax by the government, and if they ever do decide to have an independent banking system centered on a new currency, well, they're going to have trouble with exports because their currency is going to rise. I don't know. Are they still going to use the dollar? I mean, these are very big questions that are raised but not answered.
Hey, Jim, I want to turn your attention across the Atlantic. Days ago, this astounding revelation by the former Greek finance minister, what's his name, Varoufakis, whatever. You know, he's right. You know, he's hardcore Marxist. You know, and he got booted out of the cabinet when the Prime Minister Tsipras, you know, said, "Okay, we're going to knuckle down and we're going to submit to Brussels and the ECB." And so it looks to me like he's getting revenge because he just casually revealed the other day to the news media that he hacked into the taxation computer system and had secretly set up an alternative currency system that with the flip of the switch, they could go to their own currency. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I've got dozens of thoughts regarding Greece, including a reaction to this. What you're talking about is a hidden plan, like maybe a cadre of several people working actively to create a return to the drachma currency. And we've seen some hotel bills that have been published, like on Zero Hedge. It was actually from, I think, a CNN correspondent, some Western news organization correspondent. And his hotel bill said drachma EQ, which means equivalent. It's kind of like, I don't know if some of your listeners are familiar with a concept called when issued. Suppose a new stock is trading, but it hasn't been launched yet, and you're a month in front of its launch. Well, they might have the XYZ stock, but it'll say when issued. And in those things, like in the newspaper or Wall Street Journal, it'll say WI. That means when issued. So that's trading but not launched officially. Well, they've got something kind of like that with the drachma EQ, equivalent. And it got abandoned suddenly, but I think we're at the point where Greece realizes that they've got two major impediments for any kind of recovery, any kind of return to stability even. The first is the demands by the bankers up north, and, we're talking about the European Commission, the big European banks, European Central Bank, and the German banks. They're all dictating to Germany to reduce your deficit. What they're doing is they're reducing the present-day deficit by reducing spending and guaranteeing that the deficit next year will be much bigger. You cannot reduce the government spending and expect that next year you're going to have something better. No, you always have something worse, and that's why for 3 years I've gotten this right, calling austerity programs a poison pill. The second thing, in other words, they cannot repay the debt. So next year, they're going to be even worse positioned to pay the debt. So the Greeks are realizing the austerity demands on their budget are not going to work. The second thing they're realizing is they must get out of the euro. They must find a way to institute a devaluation of their currency. You know, the devaluation of a currency is not just a forced debt reduction. It's a stimulus to the economy because the exports become cheaper. Like neighboring states of, say, Italy, Turkey, they would instantly see a bargain of, say, 20% on Greek agriculture products, on anything exported from Greece. So there's no way out without removal of austerity. There's no way out without an export stimulus to their economy. And meanwhile, they're just watching this risk on a daily basis of asset forfeiture. They're forfeiting major assets, and in the press they call them prized assets. Well, yeah, it's a government-owned abandoned airport. Okay, it's a huge tract of land, prime location in Athens. It's Greek ports, facilities. The Russians and the Chinese are all over this. They're standing back because they don't want to get in the way of a falling building. But the Russians would like naval base to protect the Bosporus Straits, to protect their access from the Black Sea and Crimean ports, access for the Russian Navy into the Mediterranean. The Chinese would like to get involved in some of the port facilities because they own major port facilities in a dozen nations in the world, including Mexico and Canada and Los Angeles. So there's a lot going on in here with the Greek situation. I'd like to point out two of the ugliest of factors regarding Greece. And the first is that since 2009, about half the Greek debt that's built up is from military spending. Half. Take a look at the close budget amounts, and you see that the Greeks are spending every year 7% of their spending is on military.
Who was planning to attack
Why?
Greece?
Well, they're telling them, oh, you never can trust those Turks. Well, yeah, right. Okay, well, it's more like you can't trust Western Europeans and the British and the Americans, because who are the beneficiaries of this military spending by Greece, which is half of their $320 billion debt? This is a little country with 11 million people. I mean, the United States is 30 times larger. But 7% of the military of the spending by the Greek budget is on military, whereas all the European nations are around 2%. So why is Greece spending 7%? Well, who are the beneficiaries? United States military contractors, British military contractors, French and German military contractors. So it's a revolving circle. The bankers in Europe are even telling, Rick, they're telling the Greek government, don't cut military spending, cut your social spending, cut your pensions. The second sickening point is that by having this war in Ukraine and forcing sanctions against Russia, they've put the entire European Union on a quasi-state of war. And therefore, all the political leaders in Europe, in the member nations of the European Union, in effect, report to the NATO Supreme Commander. They're on a state of war. So the U.S. took over with a coup d'etat and $5 billion in spending at the State Department in Kiev, forced the Ukraine regime change, forced the Europeans into a Russian sanctions position, created a state of war, and basically took control on certain security matters, important matters, all the important stuff going on with the member nations, presidents and prime ministers. This is a U.S. coup d'etat of the European Union through NATO, which is no longer a security organization and is very well understood now to be a military arm.
And don't forget that the gold in the Ukrainian central bank was also hauled out, placed on jetliners.
Right.
Taken out of the country.
Tons. Right. It went to the New York Fed, but don't worry, it's for safekeeping, Rick.
Of course. It's there with Colonel Gaddafi's gold from Libya. And the former Yugoslavia's gold, and we're going down the list. Hey, one thing that I've noticed, Jim, over the last couple of months is as the standoff between Greece and the European Central Union and the IMF and the EU, as this intensified, the demands on Greece became worse. They became more draconian. And it appeared to me somebody is deliberately trying to bankrupt Greece. Somebody's trying to force Greece out of the euro. Is there a hidden motive in this?
I think it's becoming clear that Greece is kind of like a strategic extension of Ukraine. It's got a lot of pipelines either constructed or planned for Gazprom. It has military strategic importance for the Bosphorus Straits, just like the Black Sea does with the Crimean ports in Ukraine. Russia's got designs on it for, the access protection. They've made some offers. They've pulled them back, made to Greece regarding taking over certain areas for creating a naval base. And I think Greece is an extension of Ukraine. There's one thing I forgot, Rick, before we move on. There's something ugly about the 50 billion euro. There's a stipulation in there. The assets that will be seized and liquidated from Greece, the funds will go to a Luxembourg firm, and it's not very well hidden that Finance Minister Schäuble of Germany is on the board for that Luxembourg firm. So we've got another, not just military spending round circuits, completed circuits. We've got the German bankers and finance minister in their completed circuits. So Greece is very important. Are they trying to bankrupt Greece? Yeah, I think they're trying to gut Greece and take control of its major assets, and the best way to do that is with the austerity spending cuts, forcing them into a permanent recession, impoverishing the nation, and in doing so, what they're doing is they're making empty or, severe cutbacks in their cash ATM machines and in their supermarket food supplies and shelves. We've got vast shortages that are hitting Greece, and this is not easily reversed. They are on a desperate, I think, 6-month program now. If they don't get off the drachma, they're going to be wrecked as a nation. They're going to have the same kind of scorched earth that Ukraine does economically, but not militarily. I don't think Greece has even remotely the factories and industry that eastern Ukraine has on the Russian border. They have a lot of agricultural supplies coming out of Greece, and they used to be known as one of the major shipping industries of the world, Aristotle Onassis and all that. I think shipping's going to go under Chinese control. And I believe the Europeans are trying to work out a plan where Greece gets destroyed. So it's like a blockade for the Russian Navy. Don't let them get those naval ports and important protector zones. I mean, the Dardanelles. There are many different points there. They're in Turkey, but Greece has some important points for defense of the Bosphorus Straits, which have been important for 2,000 years. Yeah, this is a kill Greece project. Yes, they don't permit them to exit the euro. They're going to kill Greece, and they know it.
I noticed that, in late June, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth made a rare state visit to Germany. Did the Queen go there just to pick up some fresh bratwurst, or did she have something else in mind?
I think it was basically to lay out plans for destroying Greece and preserving. Well, the first motive is preserving banks. I think she's a major shareholder of most major European banks.
You got to give the old gal credit. I mean, she
give her
still
any credit. I think she drinks children's blood. I think she's a Satanist. I mean, she got caught with some childhood photos of Sieg Heil and the fascist salute when she was a kid. I mean, this is slowly coming out.
That was just her dear little uncle teaching her how, who happened to be the King of England, teaching her how to the Nazi salute. And I mean,
Yeah, well, maybe. But she's been charged with a lot of narcotics money laundering in the big banks of London, Rick. This goes deep.
I know. It's a crime syndicate.
And there are a lot of rumors that Diana got wind of the Satanist sacrifices, witnessed one, didn't like it, and she was dead in 1 week.
I always assumed that Diana stumbled on something and the royal family knew that she knew.
It's deeper than just stumbling up Satanist sacrifices.
Yeah. I'm not making light of it. There are always accusations swirling around the royal family of Nazism, of pedophilia, of Freemasonry. We just go down the list of things. And it is certainly one of the most powerful institutions in the world. How much power does the Queen have?
I don't know. Call her up. I think she'll respond if you call up 1-800-LUCIFER.
All right. I'll tell her Jim Willie recommended she be a guest on True News.
The Vatican sometimes picks up from 1-800-LUCIFER. J.P. Morgan boardroom sometimes picks up from 1-800-LUCIFER. But I think Buckingham Palace might answer that phone, too.
All right, so the calls are transferred. That's good to hear. Jim, China made a recent statement about their gold reserves, and it was far less than what was anticipated. Did the Chinese fib?
Well, let's start off with, does the U.S. government fib?
I think we all agree. The answer is yes.
Okay, then why should China tell the truth? They're not dealing with truth tellers, so why should they tell the truth? I get a lot of amusement from the story about how China might announce their real holdings. They might announce they have 3,000 tons. Well, they sure don't want to announce that they have 25 to 30,000 tons, do they?
Will they announce that at an appropriate time?
I don't know. Why would they unless they're going to a gold currency? I think it might be simultaneous with the announcement of gold currency. It's not going to be in these present skirmishes. Okay, let me make a distinction here. There are two important Chinese sovereign wealth funds. One is called the State Administration for Foreign Exchange, SAFE. It's a giant sovereign wealth fund, I think worth on the order of $1 trillion or $2, $1 or $2 trillion. Then there's a smaller CIC, the Chinese Investment Corp. So SAFE and CIC are two sovereign wealth funds, meaning that the central bank shoves reserves there and invests them intelligently. Do you think that $2 trillion might have a little bit of gold in it. Well, it's never counted because what they announce is their central bank gold reserve holdings. All right, let's flip back to the United States. When the United States announces its gold reserves, okay, it's all falsified. It's all deep storage gold nonsense, unmined gold in the Nevadas and Colorado hills. But if the U.S. government were to give an honest assessment of its gold reserves, would they count the Bush, Clinton, and Rockefeller family vaults? Of course not. Of course not.
Oh, then you'd have all the Nazi gold.
Well, yeah, but the Chinese are not going to announce the gold that they have in their sovereign wealth funds because they don't announce how those are invested. It's secret, state secret. And the Chinese are not going to announce their extremely wealthy ancient family gold holdings. Add up the People's Bank of China, the SAF, the CIC, and the wealthy Chinese families, like the White Dragons and other dragon families, and you get 25 to 30,000 tons of gold. So, you know, I take your information about, 3,000 tons or 900 tons or whatever official gold holdings for China. I don't have any interest whatsoever in such nonsensical, trivial, worthless garbage stories. None at all.
Will this gold-backed currency come public as soon as this anticipated change in the U.S. dollar this October?
I think there are going to be a number of simultaneous events, as I mentioned, and I think yes. I think we might see a few simultaneous events. All Asian producers requiring RMB, Chinese currency, in trade settlement with Western nations. We might see many BRICS alliance countries, not just the main Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Many BRICS alliance countries might require either RMB pay or gold trade notes. They will at the same time reject U.S. Treasury bills. At the same time, the Saudis and Gulf Emirate nations, the oil producers, might announce that they will also accept Chinese RMB for oil payment. We also might see the OPEC nations announce that they will accept RMB for oil payments. That's a long list of maybes simultaneously, and the king of all in there is Russia and China might announce a BRICS gold-based currency, gold and silver. Let's not leave out silver. Silver is to be a monetary metal in the new system. I've been assured this because I believe my source is involved in the planning and implementation of this project. So he has high credibility. That's a long list of powerful simultaneous events, all of which upset the USS Dollar, which I believe is a toxic, leaking, derelict ship at sea.
Is the global reset of the world economy, the world system, is it actually in motion right now?
I don't think so. I think the implementation of the pieces is.
A lot of people are anticipating a single event. Or is this going to be a series of events over a period of time?
I think it's going to be a series of events because each one is going to be so difficult to implement. I named a lot. RMB acceptance for oil producers, RMB acceptance requirement, by Asian producers. We're talking about emerging market nations saying we don't want the Treasury bill. These are all very important and powerful events. And I think we're going to see let's just call them 5 events. All architects for the 5 events are skittish now. They're worried. Are we going to be sanctioned? Are we going to be blocked on SWIFT transactions for our banks? Are we going to see interference and hacking in our financial markets by Langley, namely the U.S. government security agencies? Are we going to see terrorist events like, say, what happened in Madrid for their train station? These are the kind of things that the United States does in order to defend the dollar and prevent stragglers and defectors. So I don't know that it's going to be one major event with a lot of pieces. I think it's going to be a sequence that might be laid out. One of them is going to take the bold step and say, let's take, for instance, all emerging market nations plus BRICS alliances are going to say, we prefer RMB settlement for our trade. We don't want the treasury bills anymore. We don't want the dollar. We don't want them. And the rest of those 5 steps and their architects are going to announce, we're right behind you. We're going to make our own announcements soon. I think it's going to be a sequence that's given away and understood. That's what I think the reset's going to be. A lot of nonsense and discussion about, the very minor currencies are going to have their rebirth. And there's talk about the Iraq dinar and the Vietnam dong. I care about how's the pound sterling, euro, and the dollar and yen going to be repriced versus gold. I don't concern myself with the bottom end. I concern myself with the top, gold. I think if we get this reset as an incredibly onerous misnomer, which means false name. They're talking about revaluing the currencies among themselves. What they don't want to say is the currencies, the major paper currencies, will all be cut in half in value relative to gold. What they don't want to say is the reset is a return to the gold standard where gold's going to double in price overnight. They don't want to say that, Rick. Talk about an adjustment relative to the currencies. Well, yeah, relative to gold. In other words, gold goes up twice, and the paper currencies, the toilet paper with fancy ink and really unique filaments on them, they get cut in value by 1/2. That's what I think the reset's going to be. And it's going to be kind of simultaneously with all these 5 major events involving RMB for trade, involving the gold trade notes, involving oil producers taking non-dollar payments. Remember, Iraq and Iran have been attacked for non-dollar payments in their oil and gas industries. These nations don't want that.
Iran is now being brought back into the family. One of their banks just joined the SWIFT banking system.
Not all their banks. It was one bank. Mm-hmm. And I think I agree with your point in heart. The Iran banks are going to get into the SWIFT circle, but right now it's one, and I think soon the rest will come. This is very complex international chess. And unfortunately, have you ever played chess with somebody where the other guy has a gun at your head? It's not easy to play.
I like Vladimir Putin's description of Barack Obama as a chess player. And I'm not certain the quote was authentic, but if it isn't, Putin should have said it. It's very funny. I'll leave it off the radio. People just have to Google it and find it themselves. You know, the mainstream news media, these guys are the court jesters. They're the clowns of the New World Order. That's all they are. They're just the clowns. And they keep the public, their attention diverted. I just noticed this was in Bloomberg News just a day ago. Here are 2 quotes from Bloomberg News. This one's from Robin Barr, analyst at Societe Generale, London. Quote, gold is out of fashion like flared trousers. No one wants it. End of quote. And then Brian Barish, who oversees $12.5 billion of investments at a Denver-based corporation, said, quote, gold is a weird relic of antiquity. I just laugh at when I read this stuff. Jim, they're telling the public nobody wants this stuff. It's like having closet full of flared trousers. You don't want gold.
They speak somewhat the truth, though. 70% of the Western world doesn't want gold. Why would my father, who went through the Depression as a teenager, not want gold right now? He saw the damage from faulty financial systems. He saw the breadlines. Why wouldn't a man in his 80s and 90s want gold? Because they're falsely taught. Why would my brother, a Phi Beta Kappa, bachelor's degree holder in economics, not have any gold? Because he's falsely taught in the university. Now, I put on my bio, Rick, that I am unencumbered by the limitations of economics credentials. Now, that's a mouthful. Unencumbered. I don't have the disadvantage. From the limitations, from being held back by economic credentials, from having too many economics courses in my program at the university. I had 3 courses. Thank God I stopped. I'm self-taught with Barron's, with Wall Street Journal, and with other, like Business Week. I used to spend evenings reading Business Week, and on the weekends, Saturday Barron's came out. I bought it. I digested it in a 2 to 3 hour ritual, often under a tree in the Boston metro area. They're right. 70% of Americans, Canadians, and Western Europeans don't have any interest in gold. They're right. But they shouldn't say nobody, because in India, China, Russia, a lot of the Eastern Hemisphere, they love gold. So what we're seeing is a massive transfer. I'd like to just point out here the backlash of U.S. government policies. We had the Iran sanctions. How'd that work out? Well, we're caving in right now. I think China's actually giving the U.S. government orders to make nice with Iran, because we, China, are already in bed with the Saudis, and we're fracturing your petrodollar standard structures. So we, China, are going to control Iran and Saudi. So maybe you better make nice with the whole Gulf region, you idiots in Washington. Okay, then we have Russian sanctions. That's not working out well. I think it's going to result in Germany giving up on the United States with a long list of indictments against the U.S. fascists. And the industrial captains are already in revolt in Germany. And I think there are 3,000 to 5,000 companies that do business with Russia. They don't want to close down those contracts. So that's not working out well. How's the Arab Spring working out, Obama? How's Egypt? We still have Egypt in our camp? No. They're signing deals with Russia right now. They're becoming basically a Russian commercial colony. How's Syria working out? Well, Mr. Bush, sorry, they're not moving their gold. The Russians are protecting the Syrian gold. It's another 140 tons of gold, just like Libya, that the Bush family and the London bankers in New York are not going to get their hands on. And the climax of this backlash that's happening from U.S. government policies is QE itself. QE should never be a permanent policy. I was surprised when people didn't really understand in the first several months of QE that they can never remove it. When you institute QE, what you're doing is making a big banner statement. Come one, come all, you Treasury bond holders. Sell it to the Fed. So what they did was they wrecked their own market by in a sense, killing off Treasury demand. And now you don't have much of any countries with a demand for treasuries except the BRICS, not the BRICS, but Belgium, Luxembourg, Ireland, Cayman, and Switzerland. The BRICS, led by Belgium, have bought $820 billion worth of treasury bonds since the summer of 2012, equal to the Fed's volume. So you have all these different backfires. The QE backfire is declaration of the gold standard by way of the trade windows. In other words, gold trade notes used as letters of credit. QE is forcing the global dollar rejection. That's the backlash. And the dollar rejection will be in the form of embracing the gold trade standard, which will result in nations of the world deciding our treasury bonds are now toxic, bring up our banking reserve system. Our foundation for banking is now toxic. We must convert our treasury bonds to gold and watch the Saudis lead in this parade along with the Russians and Chinese. The Saudis, a year ago now, set up an independent sovereign wealth fund in Riyadh, and I'm told the Voice had a hand in the design for this. Independent of the Saudi central bank, designed for reinvesting their sovereign wealth funds. In other words, converting treasury bonds to gold, converting euro bonds to gold. And I asked a question immediately when the Saudis set up the window for the sovereign wealth fund to be used for gold purchase. I asked immediately, what about Kuwait, UAE, Oman? What about those nations? They got all the Gulf Emirate sovereign wealth funds. Half are in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. We're talking about 1.1 trillion out of the 2.2 trillion of Gulf Emirates sovereign wealth. This is all going to be converted to gold. And he basically said, well, the other Gulf Emirates are going to follow suit. And I said, will they use the Saudi office and window? And he said, I don't know, maybe, but they might set up their own. It's not that hard to do. How hard is it to set up an office for converting treasury bonds to buy gold using Dubai, Hong Kong, and other major gold markets locations? Yeah, it's difficult, but it can be done, and it is going to be done.
Jim, we have 4 minutes remaining. Several months ago, the European Central Bank ordered about 12, 13 European nations to pass and implement bank bail-in legislation before September. Italy just passed it. Why are they rushing to get bank bail-in legislation and mechanisms in place by this fall?
I think the bankers have a plan to steal approximately $5 trillion. That's the plan.
I guess that'll work.
And they're running out of time. I think I'm going to see family members, my family, who I grew up with, suffer multi-figure losses from bank accounts. And this could include standard brokerage stock accounts, bail-ins of stock accounts, because the companies like Fidelity, just take Fidelity, take Scottrade, take any major brokerage house. It's part of a financial firm. When the reset comes about, they're suddenly going to realize their insolvency is exposed. There are hundreds of American companies that are running around masquerading as operating entities that are insolvent and broken, busted. The bail-in is going to take a portion of private accounts. And I think around the United States, Canada, Western Europe, and England, UK, United Kingdom, I think it's going to be anywhere between $2 and $5 trillion that will disappear and be stolen before all the different reset mechanisms are in place. So between the time of the bail-ins and the actual reset mechanism changes, that stolen money will be in motion to go into the banker elite accounts.
Will they get away with it?
I don't know. How do you define justice? I don't know. Rick, these are very difficult questions. I've been told that a significant portion of banker elite players have signed, it's kind of a pact, a contract with the Asian families that are leading this movement. It's a movement with an accord to end predation, predatory action, the wars, and the bond frauds. And to just stop all the harsh, negative plundering. The remaining parties are the elders to the Bush, Clinton, Rockefeller families and Wall Street elite. It's the elite that are not cooperating. David Rockefeller, age 100 now, he's not cooperating, but many of his underlings are. He's got infighting going on with some of his younger brothers. He's got infighting with various sons. I believe that most of the elite members have signed this accord. This is basically an accord not just to end the plundering, but to end what I call almost like Satanist projects, like downing that Malaysian airline in order to get that super chip by Rothschild. It was the world's best chip for preventing hacking. Now it's in the Rothschild's hands because he bought the company worth $11 billion. I wonder if he declared that the sale price would be $11 billion in order to cap the price and prevent a bidding war. Now, this is all very evil stuff. And I'm curious, when will we see as evidence of a conversion of the elites and their major captains and henchmen? When will we see evidence with a cessation, stopping of chemtrails and the Monsanto GMO foods? And while we're at it, the contamination of the water table systems from Halliburton fracking. So with chemtrails for the air, GMO Monsantos for the food, Halliburton for the water, we're really getting contamination of the Earth's major systems.
And Jim, don't forget abortionists using tweezers to pick through the flesh of aborted babies to find the organs they can sell. This system is so evil and so wicked, it's beyond our comprehension. But it sounds like what you're saying is that the global street gangs are proposing a truce. Let's stop the wars. Let's stop the assassinations. Let's just call a truce here and let things calm down. Hey, we're out of time. My guest, Jim Willie, he's the author, publisher of The Hat Trick Letter, and it's found at goldenjackass.com. As always, Jim, it's always an eye-opener to have you on the program. Thank you for giving us an hour.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on, Rick, and I wish you well, and I invite people to go to the Golden Jackass website.